thanks everyone. Thanks for the introductions. Gives me a good idea of like who's in the audience today. Just a few quick additional questions to help me, refine what I'm going to say. Can I just have a show of hands? Who is currently actively using Claude Code? Fantastic. Okay. Who would say that you are a non-technical person here? Okay, about 50-50. And who has not eaten lunch yet? Okay, so also about 50-50. I've planned this to be a little bit about around half an hour, 15 minutes of me talking thereabouts, and then there's a small demo, also to be kept kind of short and simple in the interest of time. So we can go longer if you want, but that's just what it is currently set at. So today's presentation is very clickbaity title, right? How I ship without a team. But hopefully, you guys will find something interesting in today's presentation. There are several hot takes in here, so just to set the stage, I think that if you are an engineer, some of the things that I will say will probably resonate in a little in an anxiety-forming way. But that's what I see, right? And I do think there are places where engineers should go. I also believe that there are places where non-engineers can come in. So the world is just changing, right? And what I'm doing here is really just interaction with the environment. So I may make some statements, but I'm not fully opinionated in any way. So just to set the stage here, if you are building a platform, right, I think that is something strong. So those of you who are doing platform builds would probably find some of this interesting. If you are building a SaaS software, this might worry you a little bit. But then again, the space is changing a lot as we go along, right? So I come with just some demos of what I've been doing. I don't really know what the way forward is, but hopefully this starts to sort of trigger a lot of questions, right? So who am I? So I will be the first to raise my hand and say I am not traditionally trained in software engineering, right? I started as a finance guy, and then after leaving finance and do my own startup, I only got into the AI space about 6-7 years ago. So thankfully for me, I can claim that this is before Transformers. Trained as an AI engineer, realized after a little while that there were other software and AI engineers that had like 10 years head start on me. I didn't want to start from scratch, so I said, actually, let me become a solutions architect, right? And then after I sort of went from training as a software engineer and AI engineer to being a solutions architect, I realized I can also bring in my front office and customer facing skills, and then that sort of led me 6 years later to become head of AI at Temus. That was where Temus actually, sorry. If you guys are not familiar with Temus, it's a Temasek funded local kind of attempt to copy Accenture and PwC for digital transformation, digital transformation consulting company, and very focused on doing SI work, right? So building very expensive custom software for big enterprise customers. So when I was there, right, I started to see all the changes coming in from AI. I started to see how the old ways of working, right, building software were sort of getting eroded, but the large companies were actually not changing their business model or moving with the times. So I decided that I would come out, right, and sort of do something on my own. So that's where I am today. So Hasky Technologies is my new company. We don't really use AI, right, as like AI for AI's sake. We actually use AI to build software, right? And most of the software we build don't have AI inside, because what we've realized is that for a lot of SMEs, which is our target market, that we think is a very blue ocean, you have actually very straightforward and simple workflows, right? And as long as you can get it up fast, get it up cheap, these guys will buy from you, right? And they want to buy SaaS, right? So they are willing to pay you a monthly subscription to just make their problem go away, right? And this is the market we are playing in. What I do show them is sort of a quick timeline to say that like companies, not just SMEs, right? Companies have a choice: either they buy expensive custom software or they buy SaaS. and they're always kind of stuck in the middle. Do they pay a lot for something that then doesn't get maintained because they have no resources, or do they buy off the shelf and use Excel to fill in the gaps, right? That was always the case until all of our transform models came out. Then people started to say, how can I use AI, right, to kind of fill in all these workflow automation gaps. And we found that, with Claude Code coming up, right, in 2025, and particularly with Opus 4.5 and that release, it really closed the gap, right, in being able to, fully automate the process of software delivery. So I'll give you an anecdote, right. In November of 2025, which is a couple of months ago now, I had a bunch of requirements come in from a client, and I actually told some of my non-technical people who were the ones who were processing the requirements to say, okay, hang on, don't talk to the engineers yet, right? Engineers, stand aside. Non-technical guys, take your business requirements, take your wireframe designs, take your user stories, give them to Claude Code and Opus 4.5, and let's see what happens. And what happened was that within, not even a day, right, within 2 hours, Claude Code finished what would have taken four of those engineers a sprint to do, right? And after that, I was like, oh no, right? That's scary, right? What do we do after that? So, well, as you all know, I quit thereafter to form my own thing. So, oops. Is it coming back? I need to stick it back in.
The engineers didn't like that message.
So yeah, so while Mike is helping us to, there we go. So since November, which is sort of when the experiment happened and when I quit, here's some of the things that we have actually done for clients. Is that we've built WhatsApp integrations, we've done scheduling systems, vehicle routing, we've done a whole bunch of Excel workflow automations, we've built e-commerce platforms, websites from scratch, with e-commerce plugin and payment gateway integrations. We've built lightweight CRM and ERP systems. Each one of these, like I said, right, a sprint of effort in 45 minutes, so you can kind of guess like how long the version 1s of all of these started to come out. And someone made a comment about software engineers sort of, being a little bit in shambles now, right? Interestingly enough, I had a technical co-founder when I started, and I asked him, does he want to do any of this? And he actually told me, no, this is boring, right? Like, what the hell do I want to build CRM and ERP? Like, that's not what I'm about, right? I'm not code slinger. I'm more than that, right? So he was actually very happy to go off and do other things and say, you go and build this yourself with Claude Code, right? And then we come back after, I'm done and you're done and we see where we get to. So that is still a conversation that is in flight. But all of these things actually I have done with the quote-unquote blessing, right, of my technical co-founder saying, I don't want to do it, right? Please go and do it yourself. So to clients, right, what I essentially show is this, right? Like, I'm going to all of these guys and I'm saying, look, I can build so fast. I'll do a design sprint for you for free, right? I'll do a POC for you for free. And when I deploy it and you start to get your guys to put in demo data and you start to use it, then you start paying me, right? And I'm okay because that timeline is like 3 weeks, right? And then they say, how do I pay you? So I say, when that starts, you are paying me something like $2,000 to $5,000 a month, all inclusive. I will host it for you, right? I will maintain it for you. There are going to be, feature enhancements that you can ask for, and that's included in your price. So you don't have to worry about change requests, right, anymore. And I can price like this because, as you guess, essentially, I go manpower light, right? And that's really what drives cost, right, in this business. Okay, so that's a background. So let me talk about the build concept, right? Like why does this work, right? So after it worked, I kind of stepped back and I started to think, like, why is this the case? Like, why are we seeing this? And here's my take on it, right? So the software development lifecycle. This is the traditional route, right? You start with requirements, then you go to design. Then once the design is done, the front end and the back end both take the design, they build something, it goes to the testers, it gets pen tested, and then it gets deployed and DevOps take over. This is like at minimum six people or 6 skill sets, right? Sometimes more. Sometimes you go up to teams of like 10 or 12 depending on complexity, right? And then down here you can see all of the various things that people have to do. Now, the thing is, all the way back in 1975, right, they've already sort of figured out that the reason why you have this idiom, right? They, like don't add like more cooks don't make the soup taste better, right? It's because of communication overhead, right? The more nodes you add to your front end teams and your design teams, right? It doesn't make any of your software development go faster. It makes it go slower actually because each additional node actually increases the amount of follow-on connections by not in a linear manner, but actually by like a square, right? So if you just kind of do the math, right? The structure that minimizes all your overhead, right? The speed of coding aside, is where you have as little people as possible in the SDLC as you can. So if you can get to a state where it's you and AI across the entire SDLC, you have just accomplished the minimum overhead, mathematically minimum overhead framework, right? So it's like, okay, that's why we saw kind of what we saw, right, in the responses. And as I began to kind of dig into and sort of figure out, like, okay, how do I get as much of this done as possible, right? How do I get AI to actually do not just the front end, but the back end, and do testing and do deployment and do design and all that other stuff? I kind of started to converge on this thing that I'm calling the dual layer orchestration structure, right? So essentially it's a macro view and a micro view, right? And some of you guys, there's a next slide that will explain kind of where all this comes from, but you might start to hear familiar sounding things, right? Like in the macro view, there's a discovery phase where you begin thinking like, okay, what is the pain point, right? Then what are we trying to solve? What is the MVP that we will build? And once you build the MVP, like, let's use it, let's figure out what does it fix, and then let's reflect on, do a retrospective, right? Like what worked, what didn't work, and you go all the way to the end, right? And in each of these cycles, there is actually a micro SDLC where you follow what you saw in the previous slides, and you go from requirements to design to architecture to quality to ship, right? So each one of these actually, for me in Claude code, is a skill that I've written myself. Now, if you guys are actively using, you know that there's a ton of other skill frameworks and stuff out there. I think I was quite happy to see them because they were all kind of doing the same thing. I just like writing my own skills because then, I know exactly what's in the toolbox. It's 7 tools, it's not like 45. And I know that there's no like malicious components that someone would inject inside, right? And it's really easy to write, so that's where I've gone so far. But where it all comes, right, and I think actually whether or not you have 45 tools or 7 tools or how many tools you have aside, this is actually why I think I'm kind of getting the quality that I'm satisfied with, right, out of my interactions with Claude Code. Because what I kind of ended up doing in the skills is I said, okay, for each one of these skills, actually do what a traditional owner of that skill set will do, right? If you're doing that macro view, you have to run jobs to be done. You have to do a lean startup matrix. You have to map your assumptions, right? If you are architecting, right, your system, you should be writing ADRs and updating them, right? You should be dipping into domain-driven design. You should be doing C4 modeling architecture, right? And of course, for testing and all this, how are you going to start to layer in your testing pyramid and your end-to-end testing and your smoke tests, right? And all these things in the context of the stuff that you are building, right? And what I've realized is that when you understand these principles across the entire SDLC, and you can use the key words, right, contained in this to help to string along a process, you actually get a much stronger output, right, than if you didn't use it. And again, it's an experiment that I ran, so with the designers, right, I said, try doing it yourself and try, kind of using my skills and learn a bit of the jargon. Again, we started to see, improvements in the quality coming up. But Claude Code and open source actually is so strong that you don't have to follow this very, very rigorously, right? Like I've had people who come from, a very hardcore engineering background, but they know enough of the design lingo, right? And they let Claude Code fill in the gaps there. I've had people come from a design background, not a product background, right? And let Claude Code fill in the gaps on product and engineering, right? And what I've seen actually is that the output generally is good enough. It works, right? The only one place where I've seen something work a lot better was when I actually had a designer properly lay out the UI and the UX, right? And then what came out was just more beautiful and more shiny than, from any other angle, right? But aside from that, it just worked, right? So I call this skill, basically, or the new skill set that people need to have, I call it the system PM, right? Because it's not a traditional PM where you don't actually know how to code and you're just doing like, kind of understanding of your user profiles. It's not really a technical PM, right, where you're just a bridge. It's someone that is actually able to, kind of keep the whole project in your head, right, and just say, you need to do that first, and you need to do this other thing right after, right, and you string the whole thing together as efficiently as possible. And of course, to be someone like that, then you will need to have all of these skill sets, which I actually don't think is reflected cleanly in any job description that we have today. So this is a very quick run through of what I've been doing. I want to show you, right, sort of what we managed to achieve with this, because you think, okay, like interesting concept, but what have you done, right? Okay, so let me show you the more complex one. So just now I showed you a list of projects, right? And one of them was the route scheduling system. So let me show you the route scheduling system. Yay. Okay, so what you see here is one real sprint, right? 2 weeks of work. That's myself and Claude Code. Okay, so the brief was this, right? I have a company that has a whole bunch of trucks, right, every day doing deliveries. I deliver all around Singapore. So I need to be able to upload CSV and Excel files, right, that represent stuff that's coming in from containers. Then I need to run a route planner with geocoding, right, over here to create plans, right, and figure out how many deliveries can I actually do a day, right? So if I load this, then what the value is that a planner used to have to do this all day long, 24/7, right? To plan like 100 stops right across Singapore for every day. Now they just hit optimize. It does its job in a couple of minutes, and then they can see on the map their trucks for that particular job. Where is it going? They can see their routes, everything that has been assigned to the trucks. They can change they can change the order. They can add deliveries, they can remove deliveries, they can edit as required, right? And then after that, what I haven't done is say, can you then integrate this with WhatsApp, and once they make the plan, can you send the PDF plans to the drivers, and then can you make a portal for them to log in, and then they can say I've delivered and all that. So that's coming, right? But we got to this in 2 calendar weeks, right? While I was doing like 5 other things at the same time. So this is one of the more complex things, and if any of you have actually tried to play, right, with routing software, right, like you know that there is a huge headache in like how do you do OSRM, how do you find an open source router, right, how do you do geocoding, like how do you make all of this run on like 4 gigabytes of RAM, right, so you're not paying crazy amounts to Google Maps API or you know, or for cloud resources. So all those things, right, you know, was also part of that, right? There's something else that we did, which is a little bit more simple. I'll actually show you this as a demo, and this is the last thing that I'll show before open the floor for questions. So another company, right, also in the industrial business, and they said, I need your help. Today, my workers are working all their shifts, but they are filling in their time cards like that, right? And I have a HR lady that has to spend multiple days a month taking a calculator, right, to calculate what is their overtime based on reading this thing, right? And it was a very quick meeting. So I said, okay, send me this thing, and what else can you tell me? And the only thing that they told me was that, okay, workers have lunch, they can skip lunch, right? And you know, they skip lunch, they get paid for that hour. And then you have to keep in mind overtime, right? And overtime essentially is any hour that they work outside of 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., you pay them 1.5 times. Sometimes they overtime all the way past 12 a.m., right? And if they do that and they work the next day, you have to pay them 1.5 times the whole day, including their normal working hours of 8 to 5. That was the only thing that I had, right? So I said, okay, let me go back and build a demo for you. So I'll run that demo for you live. So this is my prompt, right? So I took that picture, saved it into a file, and then I go to Cloud Code, and then I say use the skill, right? Use. Nah, it's okay, don't worry. Use the 0, 0. So the reason why I do this, right, and you know, here I'm making a decision on, you know, what is my quality versus speed trade-off, right? So at least for me, because now I'm more or less doing it as a one-man show before I get to my next stage of expansion, I'm meeting clients all day long, right? When I am doing this, it's actually like 10 p.m. at night after I put the kid to sleep, and I'm like almost dead, right? I'm almost out of gas. So I consciously made a choice that this skill, I want it to run autonomously, and more often than not, I am going to not really review whatever it has written, right? And the only place that I will step in is when I've actually done a full loop, which is, you know, from this all the way until build, right, and test. So, you know, here you can see that up part of the skill, right, this is kind of debating with me. Please give me, you know, a few more things, right? So I'll say like, no, it's okay, just MVP for now. But more importantly, I need to put in this special overtime business logic. And by the way, I don't normally use Windows. I actually have a Mac in the shop, right? So that's why I'm struggling a little bit with Control C instead of Command C. But what happens here, right? What's going on in the background is that as it's going through this, as I am either approving or editing, it's all these things that it's writing, right? Saving down documentation and artifacts, which I've defined, right? So there is a kind of repo structure where the skills have been instructed to, no, don't plan, just accept everything. Oh, and it went on and said I'll just build it straight away. So normally I'll have had to invoke, actually I'll say stop, right? Like, no, don't start yet. Use 01 product to first write the backlog and sprint plan. So one of the things that I haven't done yet, I really want to use dangerously skip permissions, but not yet, because I have seen, like even with Opus 4.5, right, even if the skills giving its guidelines, it kind of goes off on its own more often than I like. So I don't really know what's going to come back if I let it run for like, several hours straight. But I'm trying to work up to that level. But for the moment, like as you are catching all of this and you are, putting all of it, you can see it's now creating the backlog. I've actually told it, right, like, okay, for epics, I want you to write the epics in a certain way. Don't write your epics by feature, write your epics chronologically, because the way Claude code kind of goes, it kind of goes in sequence, right? So it works a lot better when your epics are chronologically structured, and you can track like where you are as you go along the project. So what I do sometimes, right, is I just say after that, I just queue it up, right? After that, use 02 design to build the wireframe, then 03 architecture to write the per sprint, to write the architecture spec and per sprint feature spec. Okay, and that's normally where I stop, right? So let's see, if it will get to the end by the time I'm done, filling in the gaps. So now it's writing the backlog, it's writing the sprint, and it all goes in sequence, right? Because when you have the backlog becomes the sprint plan. When you have the sprint plan and the backlog, you can get your, like architect guy, right, to come in and say, okay, based on what you want to build, it's got to look like that. You get the designer skill to come in and say, okay, based on your user stories, it needs to look like that. The only comment I'll make here is that on the design skill. So we all know that, like Claude Opus, Claude Code, it's not the best at generating like real polished UI design. So what I have actually realized here, right, in terms of optimization, is that I used to go to V0, and I used to go to Claude Code, and I say, Claude Code, I'm going to build this, give me a prompt to put in V0. Then I go to V0, I say V0, generate me the screens. Then I'll take the screens, I'll take a screenshot, I'll put it inside the folder, and I'll say, Claude Code, please look at these screens and like note the design and build accordingly. And it used to be all like 4 or 5 steps, right? Then I tried something, because there was one night where I was really tired and I didn't have time to do that. I said, actually, you know what? You've shown me a bunch of like wireframes, right, like this. Can you just write the design document using wireframes and build from it and see what happens? And he said, yeah, sure, right? And then I looked at the output and I'm like, wow, it's not much of a difference, right? Between me doing that 5 steps and just getting away with 1 step. So I said, okay, I accept this trade-off, right? And most of this stuff is back-end stuff anyway, routing system, CRM, ERP, so it doesn't need to be super pretty, right? So there is one comment on the design portion. Architecture-wise, also it benefits from you having a little bit of a sense of what you want. If you just kind of let it run on its own, it will recommend just the average, right? So normally what you get is a React in the front, so you get a JavaScript in the front, JavaScript in the back, right? System. But I'm not a JS guy, right? I'm a Python guy. So sometimes I say no, override this default to Python in the back, JS in the front is fine. Because then I know that when I set up the databases, when I set up the SQL Alchemy, when I set up like Redis and distributed workers, I understand how it fits together in the Python ecosystem, right? It's different for JavaScript, but again, it's a choice that you make, right? It has been an experiment when I ran, because I mentioned WhatsApp quite a bit, right? There's actually people out there writing, WhatsApp web engine clones in Go, right? I started by saying, hey, does this thing have a Python wrapper, right? Then can I use it? And I realized that as Claude code was debugging, it actually went underneath the Python wrapper and like looked at the Go code in the library. And then it said, if you've used it, I found the issue, right? I was like, shit, it's in the Go code. Then I was just thinking, then why am I'm not looking at the code. Why am I looking at the Python wrapper? So I said, forget the Python wrapper. Go straight to Go, write your own stuff on top of it, write it purely in Go. If it works, right? True project manager style, right? I don't look at the code. And it worked, right? So, there are instances now where if I am dealing with like something that I don't need to be like super, strict about, I just say, okay, take the wheel on the code, right? I will review the front end. And if it works, if the business logic is there, it's fine, right? So there we go, right? While I was talking, it finished the entire upfront planning, right, of what it has to do. So it says, say the word and I'll start building. But, okay, now you can see tokens at the bottom right? 60,000 tokens. We have a 200,000 token limit. So this is one other thing that I do, right? I say, okay, don't build yet. I say, we will continue in the next session. Can you give me a continuation prompt? So I don't know if, how much of a power user you guys are, right? But you've been looking online, you always see people saying, Opus getting stupid, right? Especially for a long time it gets confused. And there have been people replying that you need to do active context management. The /compact feature just, is convenient, but it doesn't really work, right? So I buy into that. And so what I do is I just say, okay, Claude, you know yourself best, write the prompt that will let you continue from where we are. So now I just copy, right? And this again is why I'm a little scared to use this reality skip permission, because I still have to do this myself. Then I just go clear, right? Actually, just let me check that it pastes. Good. Clear, paste that in, use 04 build, please, right? Always say please, and you get a better outcome, right? So then it starts to build, right? And it's about 40 minutes, right? So you guys want to continue? Yeah? Okay. So what I am like, I've done this a million times, right? So get this done, deploy on localhost, it will work, right? The challenge that always ends up taking a lot more time than, than I wish is deployment, right? Because, putting something onto a, cloud server and then wiring up all the environment variables and kind of, dealing with the idiosyncrasies of the cloud server is a different thing, right? So this ought to be relatively fast. So let's see where we get to with it. Then what I'll show you is 05 before we go into the build, which is a quality run. So it's building. Any questions so far? Quick one. Yes.
What is your debug process?
That's 05. So it's coming. But it's a good question, right? Because actually, let me address that, right? So when I was building this, I was faced with a kind of junction in the road, right? It's like, okay, do I try to ask you to do everything, like, A to Z in one pass, right? And try to get that. So where it kind of ends up is, one sprint generally is about 200,000 tokens. I don't know why, but somehow it just naturally fits that. So we've settled into a cadence where one session is one sprint as defined in the backlog, right? Didn't really have to do a lot of work there. And so the question was, for me, right, okay, in this one sprint, do you do like everything in the sprint, or do you like break it up between skills? I tried both. I realized that if you try to ask it to write code and write tests at the same time, it tends to kind of, not do as comprehensive a job if you ask it to do like more of a pure play kind of build. You maybe get like 75% of each, right? So what I ended up doing was, because this one has to go to production in the end, right? I say, okay, well, it's an extra 20 minutes. 04 build will build. And sometimes it builds the test in, sometimes it doesn't, that's okay. Because 05 quality will come in and it will write the end-to-end test, right? You know, and when you then go into bug fixing, when you then open the front end and you say, oh, this thing like doesn't log in, that thing doesn't log in, the cost settings are all different, right? You know, and all that. You invoke 05, right? And the skills for it to actually go into the code, be really anal about, you know, sort of the code quality and checking everything. And then after that, leaving like, you know, certain documentation on like code fixing, right? Rather than just compacting everything into the build phase, turns out to be slightly better in terms of quality. So I've run it like that. So that's the 05.
Yeah, so just now when I came to the office, John was sitting outside and he forgot to bring his charger. So his laptop was out of juice. And then guess what he was doing? He was doing all these things on his phone. So maybe John, can you share?
Oh yeah, so I'll share a little bit about that. So yeah, you know, again, I'm one-man show right these days. So most of the daylight hours I'm out. I'm not in front of, and if you can see, actually this is not running my laptop, right? This is me SSHing into my, you know, supercomputer at home. Super, right? Not really super, but still a little bit bigger than this, and running everything there, right? So I didn't want to fragment, you know, all of my build. I wanted to keep everything clean. So basically, what I did was I'm using Termius on my phone to get me a command line interface. I use Tailscale to build a VPN for all of my devices, and then, you know, essentially wherever I am, I just open terminal, SSH in, and I do exactly what I'm doing now, right? And because, you know, of the way the VPN is set up, I can actually like open the front end later on my laptop and see what's going on. So when you don't look at the code, right, you know, and you have alternative ways of checking that the output is sufficient, you get to do like, you know, silly things like that. And so yeah, I mean, for me it's really just in the interest of testing, right? So, you know, I actually did this. I went to China, you know, in December for a week holiday. I basically set this up, took my phone to China, you know, roaming hotspot, and was doing exactly this while roaming around, you know, Shenzhen and Guangzhou, right? And, you know, props to China for having like, you know, proper cellular network coverage, because I'm on Simba here, and like, you know, the other day I walked into like I was at an event at ITE, right, you know, and I couldn't even like, you know, receive WhatsApp messages because all the bandwidth apparently was being hogged by the students watching all their TikTok videos and everything. It just can't work, right? But in China, I was just like 5G all the way, and, you know, the thing was going. Oh, is it done? Oh, boom, right? Okay, perfect. So just run it locally so I can test, right? So actually, I normally, you know, like watch it a little bit more. So I don't even know if this thing is setting up a Docker container. It should. If it doesn't, then you have to control it. But oh, there we go. Putting it in, right? Control P. Oh, it's not, because this is my computer at home. Yeah. So. Okay, so we'll skip that, and then we'll see what we can do. Okay, actually, so let me do this and let's see what happens, right? Can you deploy to Coolify as some time card 2? Okay. So this comes, I'm going to skip for the interest of time, because I realized, oops, I have to do a whole bunch of things to actually access the front end back on my server. Okay, initialize Git, you know, do all of this automatically. When it comes to production, right, what I did was I went to go and find PaaS services, right? Platform as a service, like render, like railway, like Vercel, right? What is this? Not dedicated, not sure why. And I realized that actually when it comes to deployment, Claude and Opus has okay, give me 1 second, see where we can go, see if it works.
Okay, so for those of you who are less technical, don't be like scared by this. Today's session is also just to give you a perspective of what's possible now, right? So, and all these things actually you can learn by chatting with AI. So if you spend the time, you invest the time in learning these things, it's actually quite doable, right?
Yeah, sorry, Choto Mate.
So one of the skill sets that John flagged out as missing sort of in the industry right now is this kind of, is people with this broad knowledge of the entire building process, right? He would call it a system PM, right?
Yes.
System PM.
System
Instead of a
PM.
technical PM. And I think in Singapore, we are still missing this kind of skill sets. Actually across the globe, understanding at a more general level how these workflows work, what are some of the key terms that is useful for AI to understand these workflows as well. So definitely in terms of future-proofing yourself, having domain knowledge is great, it's super important in the age of AI, but also picking up some of these lower level skills, right, in terms of how AI works end to end. It'll be an interesting skill to pick up.
Okay, so off problems. So I don't want to take off your time watching me debug off problems. You can, if you want, you can come and see later. I can show you a bunch of what we do. But what I was going to say, right, was that Claude Code and Opus has certain instincts around deployment. Like it will default to using like an API before it uses like a SSH key. It will try, certain API fields, right? Certain headers without knowing kind of any of the docs, right? And then it will fail. So I've realized that with different sort of cloud like platforms as a services, right? Like sometimes the way they architect their thing, like Claude just doesn't have like the right instincts to use it. I've tried using the MCP servers for those services, but somehow, it doesn't get all the way there. It's only about halfway, right? So I realized that for every increment of progress on deployment, something like that, right, exactly as what you have seen, it trips up, right, like 10 times before it gets to the first one. So what I've realized and where I've ended up, right, is like I said, okay, am I AWS? Am I DigitalOcean? Am I Render? Am I what, right? And I actually went to do some research with Claude. I said, actually, no, if you want the cheapest, right, and you want like me to actually run all this, kind of with my instincts, you should just go for as bare metal as possible, right? Spin up an Ubuntu server somewhere, wherever you want, get the cheapest one possible, and then let me, so this thing that is Coolify, right? Coolify essentially is like kind of that server management software, open source, totally free, that sits on top. It installed it for me in like 2 minutes, right? And it says, I will use Coolify to manage all of your servers, right? And it knows how to use it, or at least I've tested it. And it doesn't make as many mistakes as with the other systems. So, when I get that, I pair that together with a Claude empty file that says, okay, when you use Coolify, make sure you find your SSH keys here. These are the things that, you you will prioritize, right, in order of trying to deploy. Here are the IP addresses, here are the various things. And then when I realize when I do all of that, then you kind of get that, sort of quote unquote seamless flow that you kind of saw between 0.0 and 0.4 with the build. The cost of that server, right, which I'm now using to run, all the systems that you saw on the slide just now, 14 Singapore dollars a month. Everybody on one system, right? It's because if you're paying for AWS, you're paying for all the platform as a service, like you're paying for their like software layer on top. But if Claude Code cannot have the right instincts to interact with their software layer, it's actually better to go to bare metal. Then why are you paying an extra like amount, right? Let's spend like an hour configuring everything with Claude Code and then you're off to the races. So yeah, that's the last part, and I guess we should open the floor for further questions.
Okay, so I also like to build stuff with this, and then I'm also non-technical, and I showed it to friends, and then they started saying, okay, but how secure is this? So what happens if somebody decides or whatever hacks you and just spams your, I don't know, with the trucks, for example, just spams orders in or stuff like this? How do you handle security?
So the question always is like, how do you, so you need to know, like, instead of like a broad brush, every like SME like, what if someone hacks me, right? But, as an implementer, you actually need to kind of have like your risk matrix, like what are we doing that actually secures us against, these unauthorized intrusions, right? So the first thing is, if you are deploying on a, reputable cloud infrastructure, like they will have set up all the cloud networking and like they will take care of a lot of the various kinds of like DDoS and other kinds of just like internet weather kind of stuff, right? So you're not exposed to that. Then you make sure that you run a sort of proper security audit, right? There's the OSWAP 10 and a bunch of other frameworks. Ask Claude to run it, right? You read through it and they'll say, okay, first off, secure your IP addresses, don't leave ports open, this and that and all that, right? Then you have your passwords, then you have encryption layers at the bottom. So, once you kind of verify and check that you have all of these things present, both in your code as well as your deployment infrastructure, you can articulate, back to the client, right? And say, look, these things already all done, these are the industry best practices. XYZ will secure you against, these things, right? ABC will secure you against these other things. The only place that we cannot control are here and here. So just take note, right? And that's actually what we do in the SI business. It's just that we charge them like $100,000 extra, right? And then that's a third party to do because they say, you cannot check your own self, right? So for the clients that want this kind of compliance, we actually offer and do the same for them. If you get the party to come and audit all these things for you. Otherwise, you say if you are a small business and like you are kind of a small fish flying under the radar, here's all the things you've done. Do you want to spend more money or do you think you're okay? And 90% of them say they're okay. So that's how we've seen what's been going on in the market so far.
I'm actually quite familiar with a lot of your build. The one that I want to ask from an engineer point of view is your design. Because design is quite hard. Like, do you do design first, put Figma in? So how's your design process?
UI UX design or architecture design?
UI UX.
Okay, the way I do it is, actually, that's a great question. I've done both, and actually it's use case specific. So sometimes when the UI UX is the most important thing, I start from the design and I write the user stories from the design. Sometimes when the business logic is the more important thing, I start from the user stories and I say, based on your story, build the wireframe. Yeah. So both work still, but I've realized if you sort of choose your path properly, you reduce the amount of debugging you have to do later by like, or reworking by like 20-30%.
So you prototype in V0, right?
That's what I used to do. Now I don't anymore because I've realized that whatever Claude code generates, right, actually to me is good enough. And then when it gets good enough, being like it's like 80% there, right? And I say 80%, actually it is not my opinion, it's the client's opinion. Most of the time I go to the client with that free POC and I say, is this what you want? They're like, yeah, more or less, right? I said, I want here, different. So those, you know, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different things, I realized I don't need to go back to V0 to, you know, kind of redo them. I just tell Claude code, right? I can actually take screenshots of what it created, and I say like, you know, I put a big red circle like, you know, here and here, like change this, change that, or if there's some other like, you know, like even a paper drawing or something, right, which is kind of visual wireframe, I've done that as well. It all works, right? So I've realized, for me at least, that's the optimal loop.
Cool.
I just want to do a quick sense check. How many of you are interested in learning how to use AI for UI UX specifically? Do you want to show of hands? Okay, yeah, because I'm in talks with one instructor. He's very famous, very good at using Gemini to do UI UX. I think it could be an interesting workflow. And then if John is here, then we see how we can link up these systems. I think it'll be quite interesting. Another raise of hands, I just want to get a sense. Sorry. I take a photo. I just need to.
Or you need the raise of hands to get the guy to come, then no need.
Yeah, he's pretty famous, he's very expensive.
Thanks, John, for the demo. Yeah, I guess my question's around, because the cost of building is so low these days, but if I were to recall back my product experience, oftentimes what messed up is also the backend. Like, could you share, based on your maybe past examples with the clients and whatnot, like, how do you get the architecture right, and what worked and what didn't work?
Okay, here is another thing that has totally blown my mind, right, with regard to like tech debt. So, you know, you saw one iteration, right, of this. But when you go to iteration 2, iteration 3, iteration 4, right, you discover new data, you discover new things. Sometimes you realize, oh, I had a batch system, now I need to go to real time, I need to do this kind of integrations here, I need to save these new things in the database. In my old job, right, like that actually would be like multiple sprints of work with multiple data engineers who would then go in and like redo the schema, and they would like complain all the way. I was like, why are you changing the schema? Now everybody's confused, right? No one knows what to do. Claude Code just does it like, you know, like in 20,000 tokens, right? It's like, oh, you need a new column in the database. Create SQL alchemy migration, boom, right? It's in there. And then it's all version, you can go backwards, you can go forward. So actually the concept of tech debt to me is starting to evaporate, because you can go from, you know, architect, as long as you are on the whole, you know, architected in a relatively modular manner and you don't have, you know, like very entangled code, you can plug out, you know, a module, totally refactor in a different language, different everything, plug it back in, right? If you kind of think about, you know, like the trade-offs between mono repos and microservice architecture and how you run your containers and all that stuff, you kind of realize that actually there are a lot of places where the fear of tech debt comes because the humans have to go in and work at human speed to change things, right? But when you have an AI that can read the entire system, and these are still smaller systems, you know, to put it into perspective, right? And just say like, okay, change this module, right? You get it done in 45 minutes. That tech debt starts to, you know, really lose the fear and the cost of the tech debt. I've done it a bunch of times. The other thing that I would also mention is that the delays on the back end, right? So aside from tech debt, the delays on the back end is like, you know, when, say, so when I bring business requirements, right? Okay, Mr. Front-end engineer, okay, you're going to build something, Mr. Back-end engineer will build something. Then inevitably 2 weeks later, they will kind of argue with each other because it's like, bro, I said API spec like that, but you do like that. Now spend more time to go and like, you know, harmonize this. Claude actually like kind of condenses all of that into one. So again, you don't have these kind of arguments, and if there's something quote unquote wrong with the backend, it's like, okay, I'll just change it, and then I will git commit, and then if we need to bring it back later, it will be fine. Now actually I'm experimenting. I'm trying again to figure out how do I scale this, right? And how do I get away from having to sit in front of the computer to like run one session of Claude code? One of the things that I'm exploring is Git Worktrees, right? You know, where what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to split the instruction more along the lines of how humans work. So it's like instead of one Claude code that does everything end to end or that focus, I'll actually do what, you know, us humans will say, okay, wait, you are the front end guy, you are the back end guy, but the orchestrator guy first write the API contract. Then you, the front end, wrote the API contract, you, the back end, wrote the API contract, right? There's a loop for you to disagree or converge on something, like do that. And then, you know, because you have work trees, you can parallelize the build of all the various things and then come back later. My hope is that I press the go button at like 9 p.m. and go to sleep, and then I wake up in the morning and I come back and it's like, oh, nice, right? I'm trying that now, right, as the next scale up. But to your question on like, you know, all these, you know, back-end tech debt stuff, I've realized that actually this kind of speed boost, you know, the way you architect things really opens up different ways and different paces of building, and that's also why collapsing the number of people that are in there is very important, because that's human speed, right? Yeah, and you know, to your point, I've had a lot of also, you know, like ex-colleagues, project managers who are like, how do I manage a project now? Everything's done in 2 days. What do I do, right? You know, so yeah, you know, great question.
Have you tried putting your framework through the Ralph system? Have you experimented with that?
Yes.
Because that would give you your one-click.
So that is on my list of the next things to do. I am going to try Ralph. I think that Ralph is the way to automate multiple iterations. Right now, right now I have it at the time, so I'm just human in the loop where it writes the artifacts down and I clear context and then I copy paste, right? So yeah, I'm just kind of being the manual Ralph.